to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, everybody. Tom Dutta, like that, Butta. Can't even say my own name. You know, I said Butta because people mispronounce my name, and there I was tripping it up on my own. It is a beautiful day here, sunny summer day, and I'm excited about the show. Before we get into it, I want to tell you we're live streaming. So we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, and Rumble. And so if you're there, you can chat with us, put a question, we'll bring it on the screen, interact with the guests. This will be produced as a premiere YouTube video, as well as broadcast across all international podcast streams after it's been live streamed. It'll be accessible always right away until we do that. Let me put something else on the screen here. This is a time where I get to thank you all. So in the last year and a half, we've had some recognition for the show. First of all, we're ranked number two in the top 30 CEO podcasts in the United States by FeedSpot. Also the top Canadian leadership podcast. And didn't know about these guys, but Million Podcasts is out there, and they aggregate and do ratings for storytelling podcasts. And we made the top 100. So that's really the format of the show. So I'm really excited to share that. And thank you to all of you. Because of you, we get that recognition. So I'm going to take that off the screen now. And we're going to set up what's called the intro and the show hook before I bring on our guest. So stand by, everybody, while I set this up. All right. Let me just put something here. All right. Stand by. 3, 2, 1. What would it be like to introduce our guest today from the inside out? It's July of 1776 and New York City is about to burn. A woman just off the boat from Long Island stands at the edge of a crowd watching a boy no older than her own brother swinging from a rope. And she has no idea that within a few months she will become one of the most dangerous people in the entire city. Someone the British will hunt and General Washington's own officers will never actually meet. 250 years later, we still do not know her real name. Historians, they call her only 355, a number buried inside the Culper Ring, Washington's actual spy network, and somewhere behind that number is a woman who helped move the information that turned a war nobody expected the Americans to win. Then she vanished from the record completely on purpose because staying invisible was the only thing keeping her alive. Now picture a different room now, decades later and thousands of miles from that gallows. A classroom in Ohio, chalk dust in the air, a teacher who has just been told by the district that his methods and the students he refuses to give up on are the problem. He gets fired for it, and not long after wins a national award for the very same qualities that cost him that job. And somewhere in between 6 novels and 9 national awards, he goes looking for the one blank space in the Revolutionary War that nobody had ever bothered to fill in. So he filled it in himself. His new novel, distributed by Simon and Schuster, hands that unnamed woman a name, a face, and a reason for vanishing. And it puts her in the very same room as Washington, Hamilton, and Nathan Hale. We are 11 days past the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and it turns out there is still a name history forgot to write down. So please welcome back to the Quiet Warrior Show, Dr. Randy Overbeck. Hey, Randy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm delighted to return and continue our conversation, Tom. It's good to be here.
Yeah, fellow Quiet Warrior. So what was it like to be hearing about your great work in that intro? In
a little embarrassing and humble, but I appreciate the kudos.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, Doctor. I know you've done some great education work. And so we're going to get back into Plato's Garden. But before I do that, I just want to throw something out here to get us started. Just setting the scene, I call it, Randy. So I just told you through that little introduction, our audience was about a woman who helped win a war and never received a credit or even a name for it. And you spent 30 years in classrooms watching kids, the system too often overlooked much same way. So take us into one of those rooms and tell us what that taught you about the people history walks with or walks past.
Well, I think one of the problems we have with history is that, it's told by the victor. So no matter where you are, no matter what country, the history that you're getting is only a partial story. And there's always a lot of individual stories that make that up, that are left out. One of my pet peeves throughout my educational career is that the research indicates that history is students' least favorite subject. So
Wow.
when they're asked to rank their subjects in terms of which one do you like the best, which one do you like the most, on almost every poll, history comes out last.
Well, that's crazy. I mean, first of all, we learned something new here. That stat I didn't know, but I just want to share this back with you before we get into Plato's Garden. That in my own work, I just finished a doctorate degree, as I mentioned offline to you. I did a research into my own identity, and I discovered a part of my own history which leads back to an indentured labor chapter of Indian history that was erased from the history books or literally wasn't there. And so I really appreciate the work you're doing. So are you ready to go into Plato's Garden?
I am, very much.
Okay, I put something on the screen here for the audience. So let's set this up. What it would be like to find a deeper meaning in Randy's public work? Hey, Mr. Randy, welcome to Plato's Garden. So for the audience and those who can't see this, I have a picture on the screen. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece and founder of apparently what was called the Platonic School of Thought and the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. So today what we're going to do, Randy, and you've done this before, is we're going to weave Randy's story, everybody, through three areas. And I call this the influences of context. So what influenced his public work, his own persona? The first area was macro, no order of importance. But the macro is the global world. What are the forces that influenced him? Two is mezzo, what was happening in the sector or the industry where he does his public work. And three, one of my favorites is the micro, what was going on with the man, Randy. And sometimes we go right back to the beginning of life. So I'm going to throw something out here to get us storytelling. We're going to go into micro first, Randy. So you've written seven novels now, moving from mysteries set in school to this new story set in the middle of the Revolutionary War. So tell us what felt different about sitting down to write Abigail Trench compared to anything you'd tackled before.
Well, if anybody is a reader of my work, they know that the work is very full, very rich in terms of research, whether I'm researching a new town or if I'm researching, as I did in the book before this, the issues of MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women. But the research I needed to undertake for Abigail is a completely step above that. First, the research is much harder to access because of the fact that we're 250 years later, because of the fact of there were reasons that these people kept this information quiet and unnoticed and secret, also makes it harder for us to find evidence of that information. And when I learned about the Culper Ring, I've always been fascinated about the Culper Ring ever since I learned about it. And I learned from the beginning that the Culper Ring is composed of 6 men and 1 woman. And the Culper Ring was so secret that the identities of the 6th man was not established until the 1930s. His name is Robert Townsend. He's Culper Jr. He's probably the most important member of the ring. And the woman, who you referred to as 355, which is all the specifics we know about her, no one's ever, historians cannot agree on who that is.
Well, it's amazing.
That story, just the fact that that's not been we know she had a critical part in history, but we don't know much more than that 250 years later.
That's remarkable. I mean, so many things going through my mind about history and not knowing about it. And in fact, we have to honor you and say this publicly, that the work you're doing, I mean, imagine our grandchildren. You're at your families right now, you told me, with the grandchildren or close to that. Can you imagine them looking back now and finding your artifacts and what you're doing here and maybe you forging history? Must be a great feeling. Let me ask you to put up something on the screen. You have this beautiful book with you. Can you just hold that up and frame it for us and read the title out?
It's actually, the full title is called Abigail Trench, a novel of Washington's spy ring.
Wow, it's amazing. And I have read the digital copy. My author signed copy's on its way, so thank you very much. I'm going to do a shout out here to everybody to get that book. You must read it and post a review. We'll talk about why that's important later for Randy there. But Randy, I was making some notes here. I'm just going to put another camera on the screen. My desk cam, you can see my paper here. And in doing the research, one of the things that stood up for me was that cover. So let me put that picture on the screen. You see that there? That's an incredible one. When I give it back to you, tell us about anything you want about the cover. But I was struck by how we talk about 355, and you've given this character a name, Abigail Trench, and it's not a criticism, yet we don't see 355 on the cover. Was there a key reason you chose to give it a name versus put that?
Well, first of all, let me explain to the viewers who don't know this. When you're working with a major publisher, what you end up with in terms of cover and title is all part of negotiations.
I see.
So there was a proposal in my original case that I wanted the name Abigail Trench. I wanted that in the title, but I also had Agent 355.
Oh, okay.
In
That's
one of the
cool.
proposals, but they overrode that because they thought that 355 to somebody who's uninitiated doesn't mean anything to them. It only means once they jump in the story, then they begin to get it.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm a curious guy and a researcher, so I was actually having fun. I was going to put that 355 number into an AI engine and say, hey, can you tell me if there's any winning lottery tickets or any evidence of that? Let's get back into micro here. So, Randy, you built Abigail as a teacher. This is from what I've read, long before anyone in the story ever called her a spy. So why did she need to begin there in a classroom rather than as a fighter from the very first page?
Well, I need to be able to explain why I chose that. There's really two avenues. The first is personal. As I mentioned when we were on here before, teachers are my very real heroes. I think they're largely the unsung heroes of our culture. So for me, it was a personal choice. But the other part is this, that when I did the research on Abigail Trench, what became obvious, what little we know of 355, is that she had to have access to discussions of high-level British officers. So I began, when I did the research, and before I decided she was going to be a teacher, I looked at options of how she might do that. Now, some of the historians, they posit that she was a member of high society in New York. Yeah. And she was attending balls with officers and then were able to get secrets that way, which is very possible. But I thought teachers in those days, not unlike today, were very much invisible. And I thought the likelihood of a teacher, a tutor in this case, in a household of a British officer might well overhear secrets, and they wouldn't even care that she was in the next room, because teachers were looked at like servants. It was like, not really important.
Yeah, I like that.
Came together. That's why I chose that.
Yeah, I like that. I like the part too. I like a lot about your answer is the authenticity part. In some of the research I did, I was telling you from my own doctorate degree about identity. I think when you embody, so your thoughts, when you embody them and you come across as real, like authentic, like taking off the mask. When reading your work, I could, it sounded like a real teacher, like somebody who's wrote this, has done this before, has been in that chair. So I think that's a great thing to know. Let's go back in and throw this out. You spent years living inside the head of a woman who technically never existed, knowing all the while that someone very much like her actually did. What was that like for you?
Part of my process is that I when I'm spending hours at the computer, regardless of who my main character is, I kind of lose myself and try to figure out, okay, well, how would she react to that? Now, in this case, it's a woman. I'm a guy. So there's a lot I don't know. So I need to say up front that I have really great beta readers who read my work as it's being produced and are very quick to call me on things that are off. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure, for example, without, this isn't much of a spoiler, that Abigail is Trent early in the story is attacked. And I wanted to make sure that her response to how that happened and how that affected our lives was legitimate. And my beta readers were able to give me that. The other part is that I also spent a lot of time, Tom, researching what it was like to teach in 1776. What were the tools that they were able to use? What subjects were they likely to be able to be giving to other kids? What is it that women would be expected to know or not know, and how that might play into the story in terms of her believability as a tutor in this British household?
Well, that's fascinating. Put another camera back on. The few things I wrote down as you're talking, I'm just filling up a page with thoughts here, and I wrote this down. Teach in 1776. That's interesting. And every time you mention the language, I research. When I give this back to you, just tell us about what does that mean? Like, what are you physically doing? And I was thinking about when you said that thought about 1776. Like, man, there was no internet back then. Maybe there was no electricity, and what would it be like to sit and teach students? So just comment on that if you can.
Well, I mean, what my research involved in this particular case was, I first of all, before I ever started Abigail Trench, I've read quite a number of books about the Revolutionary War.
I see.
I got a pretty good sense of what life was like, what streets were like, what architecture was like. But in this case, I had to do research of, well, what tool, for instance, I had never heard of a horn book before I did this research. And that's one of her tools in terms of using, and I was fascinated to know that they were using what we played with as a kid. What did we call that? A little thing that you wrote on and then it pulled a figure and it erased it. That's
etch a sketch.
Yeah. And so that I was fascinated. I kind of kept pulling at it. Now there's lots of books that I use to research, but I also use the internet a lot. I'm very lucky because a lot of the historical data has now been archived. So
I see. Yeah.
For example, you can now find online a copy of all of the messages between Robert Townsend, Culper Jr., and George Washington.
Wow.
They're actually accessible online that you can do that.
Is that, Randy, you don't have to divulge anything confidential, but is that just through a regular search engine or something specific?
It took me a while to find it. It's not like, go type that in here. AI told me you can't do that.
I see.
But I went through, in the process of the research, I went to several historical sites that specialize in that. One of them is Long Island. I'll be honest, I don't have them at my fingertips, but there are several of them. And one of them, when I went down there, it said, here's the collection we have. Mount Vernon has an excellent collection of some of this information.
Yeah.
Long Island Historical Society was one of them. There's another one that has New York in the title, but I don't remember the rest of the names.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I got a comment back on that. Just came into my brain. I changed the look on the screen here for the audience to understand why. If you see back there, I have a replica of a human brain, and Randy, I'm pointing to it. Yep. I call it Mr. Brain or Mrs. Brain, just so we don't get in trouble here. But having studied neuroscience because of a concussion I had, I started thinking about some of the things you're saying about history and research and whatever. And it's really important that there's missing information when somebody has missing information in their brain, we create neural adaptations. This is what I learned about my own life. Mm-hmm. And so when you find the truth or the facts like you're giving us, we can put that in. So I find that very fascinating. I'm going to honor you here with something. I'm going to put the book picture up, but I think I'm going to read a bit of your bio out now. I didn't intend to do this, but one of the things you were telling us, Randy, is that how you get your beta readers to give you feedback. So there's so much more, and today we're learning about your story, but also we need to know a bit more about who you are. So I thought I'd just mention to the audience that you're an award-winning educator, author, speaker. We know your background as a teacher, and if you haven't seen the interview I did with Randy before, everyone, go back and find it because it's a lot about his backstory. You've turned into the 7 novels, including the award-winning Haunted Shores Mysteries series, and the school-set thriller Cruel Lessons, the subject of his first appearance when we did the interview. And the appearance is not a revisit.
Playing Thriller.
Oh,
Vintage Country.
hang on. My phone was talking to me. It picked that up. I don't know why. And so you also do other things. You've got teaching authors, and you talk about these beta readers and things. So you can tell us more about that. The Dayton Tuesday Evening Writers Group conferences such as Killer Nashville and Midwest Writers Workshop. So it's your chance to flourish. Just brag if you want about some of those things you're doing besides just writing.
Well, I think let me start with the writing part, because I want to dispel a myth. There are lots of people think that writers simply sit at the computer and create, and pop out comes whatever poem or poetry or novel or nonfiction. And my experience is that's it starts at that point, but it's never that point. So I have actually three different levels of support in order to help my work get as good as it possibly can. The first one is the one that you just mentioned. I want to give a shout out to the Dayton Tuesday Writers Group, who we used to meet in Dayton, but we are now online and international. We've had somebody from North Carolina, two guys from Kansas, as well as people here in the Midwest. And we meet pretty much every Tuesday and critique each other's work. And I will tell you that none of my work would be as good without that input. They almost always give me insight into, hey, here are mistakes, or have you thought about doing this?
I think that's awesome. Let's give him a round of applause. Some cheap applause there in a great way for that group. I think that's really important just for those who want to be writers or those writing, that we can't do it alone. And so feedback is a gift. I never thought about that, because writing myself, sometimes there's not always someone you can turn to. And what I like to have, Randy, is, for example, if I turn to you, is I want you to be critical of my work, criticality, right, not just, a cheerleader for it. Let's get back into Plato's here. Going back to what I wrote down, you said about historians and history and students not always liking it as a course. Every time you talk, my brain goes on this journey. I had an experience just recently in London. I went there for a graduation, and I went up to a museum called the Remy Museum. I'm just bringing this in for context because you're a writer, historian. And I was looking for the roots of my father, who was in the British Army. And Remy Museum was a Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers Museum. And when I walked in the door there, I was met by a team of 4 people. One was an archivist, one was a historian, and the historian actually was a retired colonel from the Royal Army who spent 4 hours narrating the tour of the museum. And then at the end, I'd never experienced this, the archivist, a young woman, came out with these acid-proof gloves on and folders, and she was showing us artifacts and pictures and articles. It was the coolest thing, and that was my first taste of what great work people do, researchers, historians, people like you, bringing things to the public that we didn't know about. So again, that's more just to say thank you, but give you a context of something I just experienced.
Wow.
Randy, let's go into the mezzo. This is now like the sector, I call it, of what influenced your work, the sector where you work. So historians will tell you the Culper Ring kept its secret so well that we still can't say for certain who its unnamed woman spy really was. So walk us into your research and tell us the one detail about the American Revolution that surprised even you and what led to it.
Well, before I began to do the research on the Culper Ring, what I was amazed is how much about the Revolutionary War that I had never heard of. Probably the two most surprising things, I guess. I don't know if that's the correct word, but the one was, thanks to a recent book, that we now know that there was an assassination attempt on George Washington. Until a few years ago, that really wasn't well known. And more importantly, for years, hundreds of years, it was not commonly taught because Washington didn't want word to get out. But in his day, when it actually happened and they captured at least one of the persons, probably more than one, but one of the persons involved in that conspiracy and hung him, a man by the name of Thomas Hickey. The episode is in the book.
Yeah.
There were, according to eyewitnesses, there were 10 to 20,000 people witnessed this hanging.
Wow.
Now, understand, at the time, this hanging took place outside of New York City. At the time, there were only 20,000 people living in New York City. So that kind of gives you the context.
That's context, yeah.
And until a few years ago, I had never, I mean, I think I had remembered hearing Thomas Hickey's name, but I had never heard that detail. And Washington wanted that. He paraded Hickey's hanging in front of everybody. And the entire army that was in New York at that point were all required to attend. And then they brought friends, and that's how we got to the 10 to 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, we did. Most of us here in America don't know anything about that. It's the largest hanging, excuse me, it's the largest witness of any hanging ever in North America.
That is a fact. That is an unknown fact. Oh my goodness. So just for context, before I throw something else that I want to ask you, the audience is international. So particularly I'm based in Canada. We have beautiful America. And then I've got people in Europe, Britain actually, who watch our podcast. So a lot of the things you talk about, some of the people have never heard of before. So I think that's why we have to have people read and get the book. So hold it up again there, Randy, the book itself. Okay, Abigail Trench, beautiful cover. Awesome. So going back to my notes here, reason why I brought this context up about our audience is when we mention Culper Ring, some people don't even know what the heck that is. So you got to read the book and all that. So I just throw this out and ask you to correct me or at least expand on it. Abigail Trench is built around a genuine gap in the historical record. The Culper Ring was Washington's, and so we're talking about not a place, but Washington himself, real intelligence network in British-occupied New York. And while scholars have confirmed 6 male members, with the last not confirmed until 2020, primary sources also reference an unidentified woman. So just anything you want to say about Culper Ring? Because when I first heard it, I thought I was reading Lord of the Rings, and then I went, oh, okay, we're talking about something else here.
Well, and I have to tell you that the term ring is not part of the historical record. So in those days, they did not refer to anything as a spy ring. That's kind of our language. But the Culper part is historical. The critical part is that most people don't know this, but prior to the Culper Ring revolutionized spying. Prior to the Culper Ring, their idea of spying was take 4 guys from your army, put them in civilian clothes, send them secretly into the enemy's camp, and ask them to check out formations, numbers, ships, all that kind of stuff, and bring that information back. And then if you're lucky, 2 of them made it back, and then you cross-checked what those 2 had to see if that was accurate. That was the idea of spying. When George Washington, who is credited with coming up with this, when he envisioned this, it was a completely different idea. So in the Culper Ring consisted of 6 members, but the ring, when it was operating, was really 4 people involved in it. So Robert Townsend discovered the secret, sent it to Abraham Woodall. Abraham Woodall sent it to Austin Rowe. Austin Rowe delivered it to Washington's camp. Well, Benjamin Talmadge, who was in Washington's camp. The critical part is none of those people knew who the other people were. So Robert Townsend did not know beyond his contact. He never knew Benjamin Talmadge, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. And except for the occasions when he would deliver it to the courier himself, he didn't know who the couriers were. This whole idea about you only know enough in the chain to be able to get it to the next level was a brand new idea. Nobody had ever done that before. More importantly, Washington didn't know who these people were.
Wow.
So Washington, for example, Washington never ever learned that Robert Townsend was Culper Jr., the nickname that Washington gave him, even during his lifetime. We know that he met Robert Townsend when Washington was making a congratulatory thank you very much tour all around, and he went to Long Island where Robert Townsend was living. We are almost certain the 2 shook hands, but Robert Townsend never told Washington or anybody else that he was the spy.
Oh my, I'm just getting exciting hearing you talk about that. I start getting these shivers up my spine about this whole concept of spying. And until I read your work and started thinking about it, that, we never think about what that really means. And another story I want to share, just because I went on my brain somewhere else. Randy, I was down in London, as I mentioned, literally just a couple of weeks ago. And by the way, there was a red heat warning. It was extreme heat. It was crazy. Learned the first time how Europe doesn't have the right air conditioning. I was on a train up to Andover for 2 hours in 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Crazy. But so my professor from the university, we were having dinner one night after the graduation, and she said, we're talking about where people live, and we're driving in an Uber down to this dinner in central London, an Italian restaurant. And in the cab, I'm saying, those are really neat looking houses, like row houses they have. In Canada, we have what are called townhouses. In America, you might have similar. And they were talking about the spy thing, and they said, it's funny because she just moved into this unit that was beside another unit. And she said, Tom, in the evenings, when you have your TV on or whatever, you can hear all this crackling and in your phone lines thing. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, MI6 is just down there. She's pointing out of and so she said, you never know. The person next door to you could be all linked up and doing all this work with technology. I went, this is crazy. And so I wrote this down here. Just comment it if you can. Did you ever think about in your research, spying then and spying now, where back then they didn't have technology? Here you can be veiled by all this technological stuff. But in your writing and research, did you ever think about that?
Well, I think what they would say if they would talk to us is that they used a different kind of veil, because except for Benjamin Talmadge, the other people involved in the ring were like something nobody would ever expect. I used the example of Abigail Trench, but Abraham Woodall was just a farmer.
I see.
Robert Townsend was a merchant that not only did they not expect, he was making a fortune off of the British Army in his store. So their way of veiling themselves was they were hiding in plain sight, because no one would expect this guy making a fortune off the British to be spying and sending information back to George Washington.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I can visualize that. That's incredible. Everybody, we're here with Dr. Randy Overbeck, who's the author of Abigail Trench. This is a 7th novel. Picture on the screen there. I'll just pull that off. So, Randy, this back into Mezzo here, Plato's Garden. This story runs, in my opinion, in notes, runs a British officer's chapters right alongside an American spy's. So tell us why you needed both sides of that war on the page at the same time.
Well, I think speaking as an American, too often the American Revolution is portrayed here as the good guys versus the bad guys.
Yeah.
And although there's lots of reason to be able to frame it that way, I wanted to present a more nuanced version of what likely happened during that time. So I decided to create a character. Now, this is not historical, except that it's based on the things that this character did are things that we have in the record that other British officers did. That was a principled British officer that thought he was coming for the right reason, thought he was fighting for king and country, all of those things, but ends up on the wrong side of a fight and recognize that at the end. And to be fair, excuse me, part of my story, I needed access to the British Army. So in order to be able to tell parts. So without giving too much away from the book, one of the most difficult chapters to write, but most important chapters to write, is where Abigail visits her brother, who's a prisoner of war, aboard one of the prison ships that the British had these prisoners on. And I wanted to tell that story because that's another untold story of the revolution. I don't know so in America lost about 25,000 men in the revolution, but 16,000 of those died from disease. And of those 16,000, almost 12,000 died from disease on prison ships.
Oh, my goodness.
There weren't very many. I mean, out of 25,000, only like 6,000 were killed in battle. That really wasn't what killed the men. So I thought this was a really important element to tell of the story. But in order to get on the ship, I got to have a
Wow.
way to get there.
Well,
So,
no, you said it well. Well, all this critical thinking, like, and by the way, everyone, critical thinking is when you take all the thoughts and you pause, reflect, have thoughts about, connect the dots. So as Randy said that about that's incredible, man. The deaths and whatnot exceed more than the battle casualties. I jump forward to today's world, and it would be fun to just write a paragraph and say, okay, in today's war, how many people are killed by drones versus by bullets on the bed? It's a completely different world. It's incredible. Hey, Randy, put this back out to you. So we already know that you placed invented characters, my words, like Abigail, directly alongside George Washington, Nathan Hale, in the very same scenes. So talk to us about the responsibility that comes with writing real historical figures into moments you had to imagine yourself.
well, what I tried to do was I made sure that as much information as we had about a particular character. Let's take Nathan Hale for instance, in the beginning. So we do have the historical record has a decent amount of detail about Nathan Hale, about what he looked like, what he was like, where he came from, what was important to him. He was also a teacher, by the way.
Just paint a picture of him just for the audience in a few words. Visually, what he looked like, where he came from.
Oh, okay. Well, Nathan was a very handsome looking man, blonde hair. However, when he was 10 or 12, I forget, there was some kind of an explosion and he had a burn scar on the one side of his face.
Yeah.
So I have all of these details in my research. So one of the things that I have him do when he's talking to Abigail and lots of other people, he tends to turn his face like this and talk. So the scar is not evident all the time. And I also knew that he was a romantic. I knew that he had studied Rousseau. So all of those pieces are woven into the story. And what I tried to do is I tried to, in the person of Abigail, how would Abigail have reacted to someone like that? Or in the case of George Washington, I wanted to portray in her how average people would respond in meeting the great general, which is how he was referred to.
I see. That's amazing.
That's how I painted. That's how I tried to paint those pictures.
Are you a visual learner? Can you visualize things 3D? Yeah, you and I share that. So when I write, I can actually I have a friend who had done a lot of deep work on dyslexia, and she does an assessment of students, and she told me this. It was crazy. So if you don't mind, and just for fun here, I'm going to walk through it. She said, close your eyes and I want you to visualize an elephant. So I did that. And then she said, now I want you to walk around the elephant, see if you can describe the back of it. And what do you see in the sides? And I could do that in great detail. And so she was explaining to me that dyslexia isn't a learning disability. It's you're learning enabled, but people with it learn in different ways. So like if I said the letter E, those visual images, you can't visualize what the letter E is, but so you need to actually draw pictures with words, and that's how dyslexic people tend to learn better. It's just fascinating. All right, let's get back into Plato's and get myself distracted there. We're in the last segment of Plato's, which is the macro. So again, we've weaved a lot of different thoughts from you. The macro is the world, Randy. So what influenced the context of your work? The world. So for example, for the audience, if you grew up in the Great Depression, you might have different thoughts about the world because of that experience, and it could influence your public work or whatever you do. So Randy, we're speaking 11 days after the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, happy birthday. So tell us why you think this is the moment people are finally ready to hear about the ones history left out.
I think the fact that we are celebrating the 250th anniversary is exactly the right time to acknowledge that history is not the rosy-eyed version that we were often taught, that history is a dirty, difficult place, that our heroes are always flawed, even great people like George Washington, and that it took lots of individual small people in order to be able to make the difference and win the tide of war. And I wanted to create in Abigail an example of, I am sure, the thousands of people who did something small or something big and never got into the historical record at all. We're just lucky that we got the few pieces that we did, because all I had to work on to Abigail was the fact that the number 355, the fact that we know that which secrets that she helped contribute to.
Yeah.
That was about it. That's all we know. So
Yeah.
I built her out of whole cloth from that.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you to hold up the book again, because we want the book with the author. Just frame it for us. Yeah. What a great cover. Thanks, Randy. So again, let's go back to that cover about Abigail Trench. What's in that name? Why that name? Did you do any specific research on Abigail and Trench?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that the name was typical of names of people colonials that had come over from England that would likely have chosen. And I wanted it to be something that would roll off the tongue, But Abigail was a very popular name of women coming from England to America in 1770 something. They come in 1775, and Trench is a long British surname. So that I put those two together, and I thought, well, that has a nice ring to it. I think it'll work
sure does.
in terms of the title, and it's also historically accurate, which was important to me.
Yeah, no, one of the great things about having you come through my show at this time is I just got back from London, but I have a new circle of some very interesting people there. I think, obviously, with your permission, I'm going to get the word out about your book. It'd be interesting to read it. And I was born there, as I mentioned to you, because of my dad's service. Randy, this is a story about a woman erased from the record on purpose, in my words from my research, for her own safety. So what does a story like that tell us about how many other names we have simply lost along the way?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Abigail, her erasure was part of the spy consciousness. So it's very difficult for us today to understand how people in those times viewed spies. So spying in 1776 was considered despicable work. To the British, nothing was more important than your honor.
Yeah.
Spying was considered the ultimate defeat of your honor. So for that reason, as well as for their safety, Robert, Abigail, Abraham never divulged that they were spies. My guess is, from reading the historical record, that there were plenty more people in this spy ring operated solely in New York. There were other spy rings going on other places that we know almost nothing about. There was a spy ring operating in Georgia, for example, which was a British stronghold. So that we have small bits and pieces of. And almost all those details have been lost, partially because those people wanted them lost at the time, and partially because it didn't fit the narrative that we've generally presented of
I see.
the founding fathers. Excuse me.
No problem. If you need a glass of water, sip. Hey, Randy, I was thinking about this as you were just saying that about spying. So in today's current world, I know you wouldn't know this unless you had inside track, but would it be fair to say that there could very well still be these type of spy organizations in the United States, or the technology advanced enough with everything that the U.S. has to know about that or to prevent it?
Well, here's what we know. We know that the Culper Ring is actually the model for the CIA, today's CIA. In fact, I've been told, I've not been there, but I've been told there's a plaque or a place of dedication inside the CIA to the Culper Ring.
Wow.
Because the Culper Ring pioneered things like dead drops, invisible ink, technology at that time. So, I'm sure those things are continuing today. And there are lots of people. In fact, one of my writing friends was a spy.
Oh, interesting.
Correct.
Yeah.
They never said they were a spy. They said they were employed by the CIA. That's what they told me.
I see.
So they could have been an analyst, not a spy. But, and I tried to get them to tell me some and say, no, if I tell you,
I mean, even today, if you're a spy and you have a partner, you're married, you can't even tell your family, your partner. I find that so crazy. Watching all these Hollywood movies about how you actually live a life when you have this secret. There's some real good comedies out there, right? That you probably know what I'm talking about. Hollywood movies about spies and family life. Hey, if the real woman behind Abigail Trench could stand in front of the world today, what do you think she would want people to finally understand about what woman actually did in that war?
Well, I think probably one of the things that she would speak to was that the critical role that women played in the war. I mean, that's one of the one of our shortcomings in the telling of the story is that we only talk about founding fathers. You never hear anything that really gives any credence to women whatsoever. And I don't want our listeners I'm not taking anything away from Washington, Jefferson,
Sure,
Franklin, and John Jay, and Patrick Henry. They're all worthy of our thanks and acknowledgement and all of those things. But there were almost always women either behind those men or with those men who were just as critical. For every soldier that was on the field fighting, there was almost always a wife or a mother at home doing everything that it was supposed to take two of them to do. And today we have no idea how difficult it was, for example, just to run a farm. And if you take the guy and he's gone for weeks, months, years at a time, the woman's got to do that. We do have examples of several women who actually helped in fights. I don't know if most people don't know this, but there were wives that traveled with the soldiers that did everything from laundry to meals to medicine for the soldiers, and hardly any of those stories are told today. So I think if Abigail were here, she would say, look, it's not that women are just as important as men, or it's not that they did the same thing, but they did things that had they not done those, the men couldn't have done what they did. They couldn't have won the war for independence.
Oh, that's such a deep point. I'm reflecting on that now. I'm just thinking it'd be great to have a book written by someone about the, not just wives, but the partners, husbands and wives behind successful people. You look at some of the headlines today about CEOs of big corporations, let's say America, right? So the CEO of this company, that company, and we never hear about the unsung heroes or those wives who are in their lives. And having come from that background myself as a chief executive, I know the pressure and what it put on my wife and my family. But I also, if I was to be vulnerable and tell you, a lot of the strength during tough times came from these little conversations with my wife Anna around a dinner table, or where I would come home and pour out sometimes worry and stress, and how just having her in my life helped me get through that. It'd be very interesting to see how that would affect some of these people, especially spies, when you can't really share what you're doing. Let's get into something to have an honor for you, and then a couple more questions before we wrap up. So you having fun still?
I'm having a great time.
Okay, ready. Let me put on the screen here a premiere of something I'm proud to share with you, which is the review I've written for your book. So we're going to set this up, and then I'm going to read it out. Okay. So can you see that on the screen there?
I can.
Okay. Now I'm a little bit ashamed because it shows my shopping habits for products on Amazon, which I still can't figure out how to get rid of. But so I'm going to set this up and just read out loud. You just enjoy it. Okay. So stand by.
Right.
So we're here today revealing for the newest book, the 7th novel by Dr. Randy. We're here revealing a 5-star review. This is an international review that is posted. You can see it live on the screen on Amazon.ca, which is the Canadian URL for Amazon. And so I've titled the review, A Forgotten Spy Steps Out of the Shadows. I've given it 5 stars. I've read it from cover to cover. Here goes. A business associate passed this book along to me. I found myself finishing it over a single weekend, unable to put it down for long. Randy Overbeck takes on the story of the Culper Ring, the secret network that helped George Washington win a war nobody expected the Americans to win. And he zeroes in on the one member historians have never been able to identify. a woman referenced in the surviving record only by a number. Overbeck gives her a name, a voice, and a reason for disappearing so completely from history, and the result reads far more like a countdown than a history lesson. Abigail Trench arrives in New York City with nothing more than a teaching certificate and a father to look after, only to find a city sliding towards her. Overbeck alternates her chapters with those of a British officer on the opposing side, a structural choice that does something a lot of Revolutionary War fiction skips entirely. It makes both sides human and both sides accountable for what the war actually cost. This is not a cozy period piece, and I want to be upfront about that. Overbeck does not flinch from the uglier corners of this history, and there are scenes in here that stayed with me well after I closed the book, which is exactly why this story works as well as it does. So if you thought you already understood this era, this book will show you how much of it never made it into the record. It's available now from Diversion Books, distributed by Simon and Schuster, and I highly recommend it. So congratulations, Randy.
Thank you so much. I am humbled by that review. I really appreciate that.
Good, because I was going to say, what does it feel like when an author gets a review? Why is it important to you? And I think you just told us that.
It is important. Well, first of all, I'm not writing for the money. I'm not writing to be famous. I'm writing to make an impression on my readers. And when I know that readers actually are thrilled with my work, it makes it all the more rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. And as a fellow author, I'll share back why I think it's important to me. And that's, nobody knows about our work. And, we have this digital platform, Amazon or Goodreads.com is another one, right, Randy? And so when we put something like that up there, it creates a buzz. People start noticing. And I was told that the distributors and the sales reps for the bookstores, actually they look for books where the analytics start buzzing about it. And they go, there's something there. So everybody get the book, read it, post a review for Randy. Let's get him to 100 reviews. That's a big milestone, and he can get there. So a couple more things I'm going to ask you, and then we'll move to wrapping up, Randy. Now, this chapter, or this question, it's a segment called The Unwritten Chapter. It used to be called The Unwritten Book. And so here we go. You've spent a career finding the stories hiding inside classrooms and now inside the revolution itself. So tell us about the story you have not written yet, the one still waiting for you to dig it up.
Well, this is a great place to share with your viewers that this book is the first in what I hope will be a series of 4, each one a different story of a different member of the Culper Ring. In fact, I will finish the second book, which focuses on Robert Townsend, who plays a minor part in Abigail Trench, but he has his own role in the second book, and I'll be finishing that book. That book will likely, hopefully, be picked up by the same group, Diversion Books and Simon and Schuster, and be out sometime next year. There are 2 more. I have 2 more books planned. One on Abraham Woodall, who is known as Culper Sr. Robert Townsend is Culper Jr., and then the spy master himself, Benjamin Talmadge. Each one of them are fascinating stories in themselves, largely stories that are largely untold. Even people who know about the Culper Ring don't really know much about the person Robert Townsend was and what his life was really like, outside of the fact of these secrets that he helped uncover. So I'm hoping this will kind of illustrate those real life people and breathe some life into them.
Well, that excites me, everyone, for a whole bunch of more books that are coming. Hey, Randy, I was just going to say that you're there at your families, and you mentioned grandchildren or grandchild. Is this like an escape for you? Do you escape in writing, or what else do you do for mental health and wellness, or just for fun, or is this kind of where you go when you're away from the other things in your life?
Well, I think first of all, I'm very fortunate. Family is very important to me. We're spending a week down here with our newest grandbaby, number 8, by the way.
Congratulations. Oh my goodness.
And I'm really excited. I haven't held a little one in my arms for a long time, and it is a wonderful mental health experience. And I do a lot of things with my family. I also have grandkids that are grown and out of college, and we play golf together. We play games together. We go to Reds games together. That's all part.
It's wonderful.
The writing part is it, you started your question with, is it an escape for me? It is. I will tell you, my wife will tell me that I'll go into my office, and normally my writing sessions are about 2 to 3 hours long. I'm not a guy who sits at the computer and sits there and works all day. But she will say that that I'll be lost for that time. She can't get a hold of me. She'll have to come and knock on the door. And, hey. So it is, I do literally live in 17. The part what I'm writing now is most of it takes place in 1778, 79, 1780. I live in that times. I think about it. I walk those streets. I smell what they smell. I'm not in.
That's yeah, that's very cool. You don't have to give away any proprietary secrets, but one of the things I thought about when I look at you, you look like a guy who's healthy, and I mean, talking to you, you communicate clearly, your thoughts are clear, you orate, you can connect. And we all know that when people get to the ends of certain careers and they start losing it, they say use it or lose it, right? The cognitive executive function. Randy, you're amazing. And I think that, to me, that's because this is also a part of what you do after, teaching. You're using that brain of yours. So well done. Our last question to you today is a fun one because it's from the last guest. And we call this segment the Warrior's Torch. So you are a quiet warrior. You were awarded last show. So they left this question, and we never told them who you were. We told them create a question that's not gender specific, and they'll come back and watch the show, see how you answered it. Okay. So I'm going to read it to you and then take your time.
Okay.
So, Randy, as you think about your own life, what's one quality, trait, or part of yourself that you were once told was a weakness, but you since came to see as a strength?
That's a very good question. It is very difficult for people who know me as an adult to believe this. But as a child, I was exceedingly shy. I was a little shrimp of a guy, beat up a lot, I was one of seven brothers. I had 6 brothers. I was one of 7, and often got lost in that mix, not in a bad way, not a terrible way, just not. And so from high school on, probably, I started working on that deficiency, that limitation, and really have forced myself into situations where I am highly social, highly interactive, and continue to do that to this day. So one of the things I try to work on to make sure that, just to give you an example, so it's not all sitting down and writing, it's not all research, it's not all buried in the computer. I also do a presentation, several presentations. You mentioned some of those, but I have a new one called The 5 Reasons We Won the American Revolution, and They're Not What You Learned in School.
Wow.
And share this presentation right now I have 25 venues that have scheduled this for me to talk at in the next 6 months or so. So that puts me out there interacting with people, keeping me social, which I think keeps me balanced.
Oh, wow. Let me just put that backdrop like that and just, I lost my applause button, but I was going to give you an applause for that answer. And so this is critical thinking. So you're not off the hook because I get to tell you what I heard and what you made me think about. Back to Mr. Brain over there. We think about the adversity that we have in life, and everyone, what you heard Randy do is tell us a part of the story that we didn't quite get out of the micro section, and it came out through this last question. And so if you're out there, Randy, you call yourself the little shrimp. Today you're a big shrimp, and we're proud of you. But when you look at people in life, especially youth who struggle with adversity, being picked on, bullied, measuring themselves up against others, there's 2 types of people, in my opinion, Randy, and that one who kind of fade away, get depressed, and become a lesser part of themselves, or those who take it and some will call weaponize it, do something with it, and use it as a strength. So congratulations, because you've taught us something big in that last question, and I'm really proud of that answer. So Randy, on that note, we're going to let you have the last word. Tell us anything you haven't told us, or where to get a hold of your work and your book.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on. But my book, Abigail Trench, A Novel of Watching Inspiring, is available everywhere. Thanks to the great people at Diversion Books and Simon and Schuster. It's available through any bookstore that you go. It's available on Amazon, Books A Million, every Apple Books. It's available on ebook. The audiobook is not yet available. They're in the process of negotiating those rights right now. I will let people know when that's available, but wherever you want to pick up your book, you'll be able to find Abigail Trench. I'm
a big fan of audiobooks, so thanks for teasing us. You're going to have to get that out because I have some visual challenge from concussion, and I listen to those, and I especially like audiobooks that have characters that are voiced over or there's other elements to it. Just a total different experience. So Randy, thank you for being with us today. We've learned a lot, and will you come back again when you have your next piece of work ready?
I would be delighted to do that.
Okay.
Hopefully next year, maybe.
Yeah, you can count on us to support you in any way, even an early advanced review or something, whatever you need, Randy. We're connected for life to support your work. So on that note, everybody, find your purpose or true purpose, like you've heard here from Dr. Randy Overbeck, and live the life that you deserve and desire. And we'll see you all here again next week on the Quiet Warrior Show. And thank you very much, Randy. It's been my honor.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, we're going to take us offline. We're still online, and actually I've had somebody still watching us right till the end, so I'm going to just take that offline.